Hey friends, welcome back. I often tell friends and family and sometimes even clients, do not allow the past to hold you back. Certainly don't allow it to define you. However, we've all heard that experience is the best teacher, and that requires us to look at the past. Even Julius Caesar said experience is the teacher of all things. However, I believe that experience alone is not a good teacher. Evaluated experience is. Big difference. Reflection is this process of taking our experience and allowing it to transform us. It involves experiences, choices. We look at the things that have been effective or successful, as well as those things in our life that have not worked out. In fact, some of my greatest lessons I've learned from failed experiences. I had a friend way back in school who always seemed to be in a serious relationship with a guy. I mean, as soon as one relationship ended, it seemed like she was immediately into another serious relationship. She never took any time to reflect on what went wrong in the last one, but she jumped right back into a brand new one before the dust settled. Everyone around her, all of us, all of her friends could see the trouble in the next relationship, except her. She moved forward so quickly, never really considering that whatever went wrong in the last relationship would probably repeat itself in the new one. She seemed to be stuck in this cycle of continuously repeating the same mistakes over and over. What my friend did is exactly what most people do in their personal growth, sadly. Instead of taking the time to really analyze our experiences, most people just immediately move on to the next one, never really learning from their mistakes or their successes. Just like my friend with new relationships, if you just move on to the next experience without even reflecting on it, then guess what? Experience has taught you nothing. Here's a great scripture found in Romans 12, chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Love the scripture. And while this verse reminds us to renew our mind by spending time with God and spending time in His Word, reflecting on His Word, we also have to renew our thoughts and improve our choices by reflecting on the past. I can remember one year for my son's birthday when he was just a little guy. He was fascinated by dinosaurs. We created this huge sandbox and we hid all these dinosaur and fossil toys in it for him to find. It was a great birthday party. They had to search and put in some serious work to find all of them, but it was apparent by the smile on his face that the effort was worth it. He found those little treasures. In order to turn an experience into a great teacher, we have to be deliberate about finding the treasures or the lessons in it. Here's 4 tips for making the most of your experiences. Number 1, reflect. We can't learn from experience, again, if we don't take the time to reflect on what that experience is trying to teach us. There's a great old story that John Maxwell shares from many years ago, and he said that there was a horse whip factory where whips were produced, and they did a phenomenal job. It was at the turn of the century, and they were enjoying their peak sales until Henry Ford came out with the horseless carriage, otherwise known as the automobile. And as the auto industry rose in popularity, the whip factory's business began to decline. So less horse and buggies, of course, meant less whips. Well, instead of pausing to reflect on what was really taking place that caused this decline, they chose to just double their efforts in whip production. Soon, the automobile nearly replaced horse and buggy, entirely making the whip useless for most of the population. Now, had the owners just taken the time to reflect on what was actually happening early on, they likely could have seen what was coming and adjusted their operations. Taking time to reflect allows us to learn from our experience and adjust accordingly. This is key to growth. Number 2 is this: find a time and place to pause and reflect. I mean, we are all busy, aren't we, with our day-to-day lives? So finding spare moments to actively pause and reflect on our experience is nearly impossible. So I'm going to encourage you instead to set aside a time and even a place specifically designated for reflection. Put it on your calendar. Put yourself in time out and make it happen. If you actually schedule time for reflection, it's a lot more likely to get done. I have one client, in fact, he has about a 30-minute drive from home into work every day. And every morning on the way into work, he reflects about what he could do differently in his personal life. How could his relationship improve? What could he have said or done differently with his kids and his wife the night before? How could that relationship improve? And then on the way home from work, he does the same thing. But this time, he's reflecting on the conversations he had during the work day. What choices did he make? What would he have done differently? If you try this method, and I think it's a great idea, I would just encourage you to also have a journal in your car. Don't write while you're driving, but plan on taking notes about your reflection time before you get out of the car. So before you go into your home or the workplace. This simple habit has really helped him improve in some big areas in his life. Number 3 is this: be intentional as you reflect. You know, it's difficult for many of us to really learn to master focusing our thoughts on one thing in this day and time. Don't allow your thoughts to wander as you sit around. Actively think about what it is you're trying to improve. Meditate on this. Don't rush in, don't rush out, work it out. This is an area that I sometimes have to work on, but it's important to use this time wisely. And then number 4, ask yourself some really good questions. Dig into the situation. Really find out exactly what really happened during that experience, good and bad. You don't want to haphazardly review the experience and make any assumptions, or the reflecting doesn't even help you at all. By investigating the experience, you can uncover what went wrong, what went right, and what you can learn from it all. Essentially, I'm asking you to get into the habit of pressing the playback button so that you can actually watch the experiences and the events in your mind. One of 2 things will happen. You'll either be really pleased or, I hope, inspired to become better. Here's some questions you might even want to consider during your time of reflection. What is my best asset? What is my worst liability? What is the best thing I'm doing day in and day out? What am I struggling with and how can I improve? What is my best attribute? What is my worst emotion and how can I learn to control that? What is my best habit, worst habit? What makes me full on the inside or brings me satisfaction? Remember, experience is only a great teacher if you take the time to pause and reflect on it. Otherwise, you're like the student who took the test but never learned the lesson. What will you remember about this year besides COVID? As the last few months of this year begin to approach, I can't believe Thanksgiving is around the corner and then Christmas. I know you're all saying, shh, don't even say that. But the reality is, as we look on this year, what will honestly stand out in your mind when you think back over a year's worth of days that you lived? What experiences will stand out? You see, the end of the year is an ideal time of reflection. As I've shared with you already, we look back before we look ahead, because reflection really is this process that turns experience into insight. What you reflect on determines what you will learn. I like to guide my reflection process by my calendar. I love looking back on the appointments I've kept throughout the year, meetings I've held, any other time commitments that I've made to help me learn to invest my time wisely in the year to come. It's a process that really works well for me, and I've shared that with others as well. But I don't just work on reflecting on my calendar, because then the only lessons I really learn would be about priorities and scheduling. And while those are fantastic, I encourage you to try that weekly, monthly, and at the end of the year. There's so much more that should be learned too. The calendar is just a great starting point for me. I look beyond just where and how I've spent my time, and I also think about the people I spent time with. The purpose for that time. I think about the faces that I met, and did I add value to their life? Did I succeed in that mission? And I'm not afraid to say that I'm not always as successful as I would like to be. But I learn from those moments. I learn ways that I can continue to grow and improve. But I also look at these successes. Sometimes I become tempted to just focus on the failures, but there's a lot to learn in the successes too while we're reflecting. So don't just examine what didn't work. It's okay to celebrate those successes. Give yourself a pat on the back, because when we know what worked, we can repeat that behavior, right? I can recall a few years back, a friend telling me that, in fact, she encouraged me to become certified with John Maxwell. And she had just attended a certification event in Orlando, and they are phenomenal. Thousands of people throughout the entire world show up, and they're just hungry for personal growth and leadership development. And during this event, she said that the CEO at the time, Mark Cole, was talking to the president at the time of the John Maxwell team. And Mark congratulated him on a job well done. She heard him say that this was one of the best events ever. We just can really celebrate in this success, and congratulated him on his hard work. And then he said, I have a list of 37 things that could make this next event even better. Wow. I mean, he had taken the time to reflect on each success while the event was happening, but he also took notes on future improvements. Shouldn't we be doing the same thing? So what will you remember about 2020? Will it be only what went wrong, or will you also spend time thinking about what went right? Hey, when it comes to reflection time, make sure that you're looking back in a way that will help you move forward. Another great verse is Luke 14:28 that says, For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Just as a contractor will take the time to review house plans before the foundation is ever created, or an orthodontist will examine and analyze photos and measurements before braces or a retainer is ever created, but always with the end goal in mind. You should also be committed to personal growth and realize that it's going to take time to intentionally reflect, not only on your losses, but also your wins, because each one holds their own lessons that can help you and I grow into the best version that we can be. Thank you for your time as always. I look forward to seeing you soon.